Good evening and welcome to a special edition of Pull. I'm here at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. We'll be speaking with two Afghan American students to learn more about the life of a college student on an American campus. But first, we'll travel to nearby American University to see what U.S. students are learning about Afghanistan.
Oftentimes the media covers without really questioning the information. As you know, I mean, there are not many reporters or journalists on the ground independently. They are embedded with the forces, whether it's the U.S. forces or other forces, but independently, there are not any actually over there. So the information comes from one source.
Actually, I found out about this class through my job when I found out about Professor Akram's background. I didn't know much about the culture at all. Probably the one thing is just how complex the ethnic issues are and how different ethnic groups interact and how alliances shift so rapidly and so quickly and how alliances that were built at one point can be broken and then remade over a course of even 10 years.
I'm from, my family's from Mashhad, which is pretty close to the border, so I knew their food and I knew their language and I knew I couldn't understand their accent at all. That was it.
One thing that we touched on it in the last class that really surprised me was that despite all the the different ethnic groups, ethnic militias, tensions, there isn't a big separatist movement amongst any of the groups. There seems to be a belief in one Afghanistan, which is really interesting.
One of the things that struck me the most was how much we fund warlords and how we focus so much on individual tribes. But at the same time, by focusing on them, it makes it more difficult for the government to move into those areas because now those tribes or those fractionalized parts of society are so powerful.
I remember, I think it was 2 weeks ago in class, our professor juxtaposed two pictures of women in Kabul, one from the 1970s and one from today. And the woman in the 1970s was in a mini skirt and wearing makeup and has designer sunglasses. And then today they're all in veils, etc. So I think really it shows that the religious situation in Afghanistan is a lot more complicated than we assume it to be.
And the American media, I think they like to focus on things like that and showing that the women are really, they don't have any rights, they don't have a say in society or anything, but the media tends to focus on all the really negative parts, and they don't really focus on the small progress that's made in the country. And I think there's a lot of good work going on at the local level, and the Afghan people I think are really resilient and they want the change and they want to have a developed society. But the media tends just to focus on the negative parts and civilians dying and the conflict that's still going on right now. I'd rather have a negative opinion of mainstream American media to begin with.
The unfortunate part is the way they're portrayed in the media here is very much in the negative, as in the Taliban and that type of image as what Afghan society is like. And I think something we learned in this class is, although maybe sectors of the society are like that, on a whole there's a lot of diversity and it's a very different picture of what Afghans really are like.
For all the values that the Afghans have, that while they're foreign as a way of life, we understand a lot of those values, hospitality and caring about not only your immediate family but your extended family. That while we're not very good at practicing all of those values, we highly respect those values and we value and appreciate when people are able to do that and put the interests of everybody else ahead of their own interests. And so while we don't really do that, we do have a lot of respect for it.
I mean, certainly, here in the United States, we care about our immediate family and, perhaps even our uncles and cousins and grandparents. But my impression is it's just not the same sort of strength of bonds as exists in Afghan society. And, there's definitely advantages to the way things are here in the United States. I mean, we have a lot of individual freedom, a lot of focus on individual initiative. But I definitely see that the strength of the family as being a great part of Afghan culture as well. I think it really gives people a network of support that doesn't necessarily exist here.
It's hard to say, who is an Afghan, because there are so many different groups within Afghanistan that I guess in kind of some ways they're somewhat like the United States, with many different ethnicities living all within one area that they all kind of acknowledge as Afghanistan. Tajiks and Uzbeks and Hazara. You have all these people within Afghanistan. So to say who is an Afghan, and or what does an Afghan look like is kind of hard because they dress differently, eat different foods. And
But like the image that comes in my mind, like physically, like jet black hair and white skin. That's just what I think.
It's funny because you see people who, look like me. They're white, they have blue eyes, it's very strange. I saw a picture with someone from Afghanistan with blonde hair, blue eyes, but it's very strange to have that, especially like I've heard amongst the Pashtuns, like you have a really big gamut of what people can look like.
I wish I'd learned more Mullah Nasruddin stories.
Actually, we did a comparison in class between the Soviet Union when they were there and the U.S. when they were there, in a timeline in comparison. And there were some interesting similarities, actually more on the home front for the Soviet Union and the U.S. After a period of time, how reformer presidents have, or in the case of the Soviet Union, Gorbachev came in and actually reconsidered the entire strategy, and how Obama did a similar thing.
I hope 4 or 5 years down the road, the fight against the Taliban will be winding down. I'm pretty hopeful for how things, at least on the war effort front, are going. But when it comes to building the Afghan government, our strategy creates the problem for the Afghan government. And that's not to say the strategy isn't necessary, because I think it is, but it's something that we're going to have to deal with.
To be honest, I thought I knew more about Afghanistan going in than I feel like I know now, because it's just more complex than I ever imagined.
If it was a simple situation, the conflict would have been resolved 8 years ago or 9 years ago, but it's not. It's been 30 years, and because it's complex, you have to give that flavor, the diversity to the students, and they're very smart. They catch very quickly, and they debate on the issues, and it's very interesting. If you can just step back a couple of years or 10 or 20 years and compare situation, and then you get keys to understanding today's events much better than if you were just jumping in and say, okay, this is what's going on in Afghanistan, and look forward without looking at the past. So I think it's very, very interesting, and they catch up very quickly.
Going into this class, I basically knew nothing about Afghan's history. I knew a lot about the current war, what was happening right now, but nothing about what had happened before. And then reading about when the Soviets invaded and what they did for their 10 years, and the Taliban for their 10 years, and to think that all these Afghans that went through that are still fighting, and they're still living, and they're still existing, it just baffles me. Because I couldn't imagine if it was us going through those kind of scenarios, what our society would look like afterwards.
I'm here with Nawa Arsalah and Faisal Rahimi, co-presidents of the Afghan Student Association here at George Washington University. Thank you for joining us. The first few weeks and even the first few months of attending college can be, quite overwhelming. You have a lot of new things that you're learning. What was it like for you starting out as a freshman?
Essentially, it was kind of really difficult, just because you're kind of in a new surrounding. So it was kind of difficult interacting with different students that I've never met before. That was kind of a difficult process, but once you really jump in and, like I said, participate in all the organizations, all the activities.
You decided to live off campus,
Yes.
but do you think that's affected your college experience?
No, actually, I think it's better. I think I stay more focused and more grounded because I still have my parents around me. I still have my family, and it's actually very cultural to stay near your family. And I think that when you're on college campus, like I have my friends who live on campus, there's a lot of distractions here. And when you're at home, it's the same thing as high school. You have to come home when you study, and that's the same thing that I do.
Do you feel like, though, that when you're here, okay, you're Afghan American and you're coming into a new college experience, do you feel that the other students here accept your Afghan heritage?
They're so interested in our culture, especially with the media, American media covering it since of the war. They're very interested in learning about our culture, our dialect, and essentially all our customs.
Are they asking you a lot of questions when you do say that, okay, maybe you were born here, but your parents are from Afghanistan?
Yeah, I get a lot of questions daily, especially when the recent troop surge. Everyone was asking me because they knew that I'm Afghan. How do you feel about this? What do you think? And GW is a very different, and college in general is very different than high school. People are a lot more open-minded and they want to know these things. They want to understand. Otherwise, they wouldn't even go to college if they didn't want to learn about these things. So they really want to know anyways.
What were the common questions they were asking you?
People ask me, like, why don't you wear a scarf? That's people ask me that a lot. Why don't you wear a scarf and your parents are okay with you going to school, and what are you planning on doing? Do you want to go back? So.
And you just mentioned, people sometimes asking, maybe they assume that as a Muslim woman you should be wearing a scarf and you're not. Do you feel, though, that they're at least respectful of your religion?
They are very respectful. I remember my first semester of college ever. It was Ramadan, so I was fasting too, and I was just starting school, and I'm commuting, so I'm very thirsty, and I'm confused, and people were like, oh, let's just go to lunch. I'm trying to make new friends, and I'm like, well, I can't even go to lunch with you because I'm fasting, but they found that interesting, and I'm also double majoring in Islam, so a lot of people that I do interact with already have some of an understanding.
And of course, we also have the other element of faith. You have being an Afghan American, but also a Muslim here on campus. Do you feel that students here are pretty understanding of different faiths?
Actually, they're more than welcome. Like I said, the Jewish Student Association actually invited us to participate in student activities. The Muslim Student Association as well, the Sikh Student Association. All of them are more than welcome, interested in learning about Islam, and they kind of want us to as well learn about their faith.
I mean, even though you're not living on campus, there's some activities, let's say, it's prevalent in college campuses in the U.S. for there to be a lot of drinking of alcohol. It's just part of the college life. Does that make you feel uncomfortable?
Essentially, the students don't really force you to drink alcohol. I have a strong faith in Islam, so essentially it doesn't really affect me. And the people, like I said, don't force you. It's really up to you.
And both of you are the co-presidents of the Afghan Student Association. Can you tell us about some of the activities that the organization is doing this year?
We had a charity drive, so we had collected lightly used winter clothing, and we collected all these items on campus. We had boxes all in every dorm, and we had boxes in the library, Marvin Center. People dropped off. We got a tremendous turnout. It was wonderful.
And you sent that to Afghanistan?
We sent that to Afghanistan. We also had boxes at local masjids, and George Mason University helped us a lot also. So we had a great turnout, and we had all the students come help, and we folded all the clothes really nicely, and we sent vitamins and a lot of medicine, different things like that. It was a great turnout, and all that stuff has already been sent to Afghanistan.
And obviously going to college is not an easy thing. How many hours do you think you're putting in studying a day?
Daily, it's always very sporadic. Like when I'm eating lunch, I'm studying. When I'm walking around, I have a book on the metro. I'm always reading. So hour in a day, probably at least 5 hours.
You talked about studying many hours a day, which is typical of most college students. Is it mainly studying for tests, writing? What kind of assignments?
For one course I'm taking, Reading Islam, we have to analyze a surah almost weekly. And analyzing a surah is a lot of work because you have to first read the different translations, consult different people. So it's a lot of work put into that. And I think the amount of effort you want to put into it also equates to how much time you spend.
And for our Afghan audience, some of them don't have the opportunity to pursue higher education, but for those that do, what would you say to encourage them to go down a path of getting a four-year college degree?
In terms of, just because I'm double majoring in Islam we learned a lot about how it's a duty of a Muslim to get educated. There's one hadith that says that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, if you educate your daughters, I will stand between you and hellfire. So just that alone, and there's another hadith that says you should search for education all the way as far as to China. And in terms of where Islam was originated, China was very far. So figuratively speaking, it's it's not only should you just to better yourself, but it's your duty as a Muslim to do so.
And you?
The best advice that I could give them is there's numerous opportunities. Essentially, if they cannot come and study in the U.S., there are other countries offer opportunities, and I think even the Ministry of Education is possibly offering scholarships. So my best advice to them is apply to those scholarships and take advantage of all the resources that are available.
Thank you very much for your time and sharing your experience. When we come back, we'll talk with a young Muslim woman about life in a college dorm. Joining me now at Strong Hall is GW sophomore Zara Khan. Zara, thank you for joining us.
Wow.
You've had a very international upbringing. Can you tell us where you grew up and how you ended up here at George Washington University?
I always say I'm very, very blessed, alhamdulillah, because I grew up in Saudi Arabia, but I'm originally Indian. My parents are from a small town called Bhopal. It's in the state of Madhya Pradesh, MP. And it's like, you have that American story where the immigrant comes to the United States. In the Middle East, it's the South Asian goes to the Middle East, So we went to Saudi Arabia to find that dream. And they said that no matter what, they wouldn't compromise with their kids' education. Because in Islam, we have the idea of education is key, and and a right for the child, like a basic right. So my parents made sure that a lot of people were told them, why are you spending so much money sending him to a British school? You know, you can send him to the Indian school, maybe send your son to the British school, he can go to London and be a doctor. But I was like, no, education is for all my kids, for girls and boys. And in Islam, I don't care if they become doctors or lawyers, that's not my intention. It's they need to become good people. And in order to be good people and good Muslims first, to be good people, they need to be knowledgeable and not ignorant.
And what was the transition like from Saudi Arabia to the United States?
It's a very different one. You come in and you're just like, oh, where am I? Because my parents, I came completely alone by myself, like here. So in the beginning, you're just there's a lot of culture shock. But then you also really it's new, but it's exciting because of everything you've seen and heard of and everything and what you study. And it's exciting, but it's a little scary as well.
And what was, most challenging and most rewarding about that transition?
Well, the most challenging thing was that in Saudi Arabia, we're never exposed to so much, it's such a different culture. In Saudi Arabia, you don't have to read the menu twice, because everything's halal and there's no pork. So here you've got to check everything, and there's no exposure to alcohol ever. First time I saw, I was just I kept watching. I was like, what's happening? And everyone was like, this person's drunk, you don't realize? I was like, no, I've never seen that. So those are the new things. Those are the most difficult things. But the exciting things are that you get to meet so many different kinds of people. The freedom of this country, it's the thing that's made it so powerful and successful, that there's so many different kinds of people. It's exciting.
And you live here at Strong Hall as an all-female dorm. Why did you choose to live here in Strong Hall?
Well, I wanted to make my transition from Saudi Arabia to America. I knew it'd be difficult, so I wanted to keep something that was familiar. And we're not used to being around guys so much all the time, because we still have roommates who are female. That's a lot of people get mixed up about, just on the floor and being around them. Plus, I wear the hijab, so it's just easier to go out on the floor wearing it and without feeling like I have to take it.
And how has living here in Strong Hall shaped your college experience so far?
A lot of people said, oh, you're going to live in Strong, that's so boring, you're not going to have a true American experience. But it was the best thing I did, because I met my best friend on my floor. First person I met was my sweet mate Nora from Egypt, and she became my best friend. It's a very diverse in culture, and it's often you'll find a lot of like-minded people, because the people who choose Strong, the first choice, are usually people who are a little bit more conservative, who are a little bit more hesitant to be living with guys. So they have their like-minded, they think a lot. Even if I have American friends, they're still a little bit more on the conservative side, so it's cool.
And you mentioned wearing the hijab. How's that experience been like?
Here, they're so accepting, and a lot of people don't know about it, which is okay, you don't have to know, but they ask questions very respectfully. Also, I think it's also because I live in a academic environment, so a lot of people do know about it more than others. When I go out to Virginia or something like that, a lot of people stare and stuff. I went to a small town, Pennsylvania, they're like, what's happening, And they ask questions, but more or less, it's been actually really cool.
How has the experience wearing hijab been for you compared to Saudi Arabia or living in other countries like India?
Well, in India, most of my relatives don't wear it like that. They just wear the shalwar kameez, the regular, and they just loosely cover. That's how my mom and people do it. So there in Saudi Arabia, it's very different. Because they know, if I show this much hair, they're like, put down here. What are you doing? You're a hijabi. And they have a lot more expectations from me, because they know what this means. This means you're a representation of something that's really big. So they expect a lot. Here, they don't know so much. So they're very accepting of a lot of things. Oh, this is how you are and this is what you do. So it's just easier. It's just I am just another person with a tattoo or something. I just wear the scarf.
And, tell us about a typical day here as a student. What you do during the day, your social life.
You'll go to get lunch at J Street, which is our food area. And then you'll meet your friends in class where you sit. Then you'll just come home. I hang around with my friends. Sometimes we go out to usually we go out to dinners, because that's our way of having fun, or to the movies at night. Come home, you do work, and then sleep.
But going back to you being here, a young Muslim woman on campus, and you are wearing the hijab, so people know that you're Muslim. Do you feel like you're accepted here in the college community?
In the college community, yes, absolutely. Like I said, there's such diversity, especially in GW, that they always just ask you. They just ask you a lot of questions, and you're just another kind of different person. Yeah, it might be a little difficult, because you've got to explain that. As a guy, I might not hug you, and they're like, why? They get offended. But I'm just like, this is just my culture and everything, And there are different, these kind of ideas that are difficult, but they never hate on it. They always ask questions.
What is the most asked question that you get?
Do you wear this to sleep? Do you wear this all the time? I just have to explain that I only wear it in front of boys and like not in front of my parents. It's like more flexible than people think it is. That's the biggest question I get. Or more like the scariest question I get, which I get really upset about. Well, not upset, but they ask me like, so you were suppressed, how did you come to America? And I was so upset. I was like, you're in an academic institution. Before you make such generalizations, ask before you do. And that's the most upset because I wasn't suppressed. I did this by choice. It's something I believe with full conviction, and I've thought about it. And I always think that if I'm in a college like you, why do you undermine my intelligence that you can make a decision freely, but you think I can't? I'm here just as much as you. I'm here for a reason.
I notice you have a prayer rug here in your room.
Yeah.
Are you able to do your prayers outside of your room here?
We have a mosque in our activity center, Marvin Center. It's like our MSA, Muslim Student Association office. So I go up there to pray if I'm off campus, or I just I have a smaller compass carrier which I carry, and it tells me the direction and everything. So if I'm somewhere that it's difficult, I do my prayers and everything over there.
In terms of your academics, I understand you're a sophomore and you're in the School of International Affairs. Why did you decide to major in international studies?
Well, because a lot of my background is like I grew up with balancing so many different cultures. I was always interested in how, and also I know that my role in society as a Muslim is to help my community. And my parents wanted me to be a doctor. You know, that's our culture, be a doctor. I said, Dad, that's not my thing. So I wanted to be. He said, why? Because in medicine you can change the lives of people, so like it's your profession. So I said, Dad, there's two things that the world lacks: good healthcare and justice. So let me try to go into the field of law and make policies to help the world and make an impact on it. That's why I did international affairs.
Do you plan to use that knowledge here in the United States and try to change policies from here, or do you want to go back to either India or the Middle East?
It's open right now. Wherever I feel like I can make them, where I can influence the most. I might try staying here. Like next semester, I'm hoping to work on the Hill, the Capitol Hill, to work with this organization called CARE, Center of American Islamic Relations, and it works basically with American politics and policies and legislations that affect Muslims and all that stuff. So,
and lastly, Zara, I just want to go back to your talking about the importance of education in Islam.
Yes,
that you grew up and there was a big emphasis on educating girls. As a young Muslim woman, you lived in India, you've lived in Saudi Arabia, and now you lived in the U.S. What would you say to other Muslim families regarding education?
For me, I think education, it's a basic right, like I said, for all children, girls or boys. If we don't empower our women, then our future kids, because a lot of the time that's the role they take on, won't be educated. And ignorance is the reason why we have so much hatred and wars that are going on. And if you educate your women, they educate your children. So they represent, the growing the future generations. And so I think it's really important.
Thank you, Zara, for your time. I appreciate you letting us come here to your dorm. My thanks to Zara Khan, Fazl Rahimi, Nawa Arsala, Dr. Asim Akram, and the students at the American University and the George Washington University Afghan Student Association. We'd love to hear what you think about this or any other poll program. Just go online to aamtv.tv or tolo.tv. See you next week for another edition of Poll.